Imagine inheriting a remote cabin deep in the woods, but on your very first day, your gentle dog suddenly rushes out to block a stranger with fierce vigilance. That is exactly how Liam's nightmare began. Moments later, the dog digs up a military ammo box from 1980 containing mysterious negative films. But before Liam can understand what is happening, a loud explosion rings out, and the entire hill behind them begins to slide. Why would a billion-dollar corporation be willing to create a natural disaster just to bury a penniless man and an old camera under the mud? How terrifying is the secret hidden in that box? Let's find out, and don't forget to support us by subscribing to the channel. The rain fell over Forks, Washington, like a heavy gray curtain that never seemed to lift. Inside his battered van, 35-year-old Liam Harper watched the water streak down the windshield. He looked older than his years, his face hidden behind a thick, unkempt beard, and his eyes held the hollow, haunted look of a man who had seen too much tragedy through a camera lens. Beside him sat Rusty, a 5-year-old golden retriever whose coat was turning the color of sugar around the muzzle. The dog rested his heavy head on Liam's knee, letting out a soft, vibrating whimper that resonated against Liam's leg. Rusty was more than a pet. He was the anchor that kept Liam from drifting away in a world that had become too loud and too bright. Liam gripped the rusted iron key in his pocket. He had just stepped out of a small law office with the deed to a riverside cabin belonging to his Uncle Arthur, a man who had vanished mysteriously 40 years ago. The lawyer had shared a piece of news that seemed insignificant at the time, but lingered in Liam's mind. The massive Elwha Dam upstream was scheduled for removal starting next month to restore the river's ecosystem. The lawyer explained that the water levels would drop drastically and the landscape of the valley would change forever. As Liam turned to open the driver's side door, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, blocking his path. It looked alien against the backdrop of the town's mud-splattered pickup trucks. The window rolled down, and a man stepped out. He introduced himself as Marcus Stone, a director for EverGreen Paper and Timber. Stone wore a crisp, tailored suit that seemed impervious to the damp air, yet Liam noticed his expensive leather shoes were caked in a strange, thick gray mud. Stone wasted no time on pleasantries. He offered to buy the property immediately, offering double the market value in cash. He claimed it was for an urgent ecological buffer zone required before the dam removal began. Liam hesitated. His bank account was empty, and he had not eaten a proper meal in 2 days. The offer was a lifeline, a chance to restart somewhere dry and warm. He opened his mouth to agree, his hand reaching out. Sensing victory, Stone took a sharp step closer, his voice rising with impatient urgency as he thrust a pen toward Liam's chest. That was when Rusty moved. The golden retriever, known for loving every stranger he met, did not wag his tail. He did not growl or bare his teeth. Instead, Rusty stepped deliberately between Liam and the businessman. He planted his paws firmly and leaned his entire 80-pound frame against Stone's legs. It was a solid, heavy wedge of muscle and fur. Rusty used his body weight to physically shove the man backward, forcing him to stumble away from Liam. It was a silent, non-violent barrier, a clear message that this man was not permitted to come any closer. Liam froze. He watched Rusty sneeze repeatedly, wrinkling his nose at the mud on Stone's shoes. A cold suspicion settled in Liam's chest. Why was a powerful corporation so desperate for a rotting shack in the middle of nowhere? Liam looked at the check, then at his dog. He shook his head, told Stone the property was not for sale, and climbed into his van. As he drove away toward the mountains, he saw Stone watching him through the rain, his expression no longer friendly. The gravel road leading to the property was little more than a pair of muddy ruts swallowed by ferns. When the cabin finally emerged from the mist, it looked like a dying creature. Vines strangled the porch, and the roof sagged under the weight of decades of damp moss. Liam parked the van and stepped out, his boots sinking into the soft earth. The silence here was profound, broken only by the rushing of the Hoh River nearby. As he walked toward the water, he noticed something unsettling. While the forest around them was lush and vibrant, the vegetation clinging to the riverbank was strangely stunted. The leaves were yellow and brittle, and the trunks of the saplings were twisted, as if the soil itself had poisoned them. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and abandonment. Liam ran a finger along the dusty kitchen table. Memories of summers spent here as a boy flickered in his mind. On impulse, he knelt and felt beneath the rough wooden table, checking a secret spot where he and his Uncle Arthur used to hide messages during their games of hide and seek. To his shock, his fingers brushed against paper. Taped securely to the underside of the wood was a yellowed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Arthur's handwriting hasty and jagged. It read, "Do not trust the river when it rains. Do not trust men in suits wearing mud boots." A chill raced down Liam's spine. The warning felt like a hand reaching out from the grave pointing directly at Marcus Stone. Before he could process the note, a frantic scratching sound came from the backyard. Rusty was at the base of a massive ancient oak tree, digging with an intensity Liam had rarely seen. Dirt flew in harsh arcs behind the dog's paws. Liam hurried over. Rusty whined his claws, scraping against something metallic buried deep within the roots. Liam ordered the dog back and knelt in the mud, clearing away the wet earth until he exposed the handle of a heavy olive-drab box. It was a military-grade ammunition crate, the kind designed with a rubber seal to stay waterproof for generations. With a grunt of effort, Liam hauled the box onto the grass. The latches were stiff with rust, but they eventually gave way with a grinding protest. The seal held true. The air inside smelled stale and dry preserved since 1980. Inside there was no ammunition. Instead, the box contained stacks of negative film sleeves, a leather-bound diary, and an object that made Liam's breath catch in his throat. It was a Leica M3 camera. The chrome was dull, but the lens was pristine. It was the camera Uncle Arthur had taught him to use, the machine that had inspired Liam's entire career. Slowly, reverently, Liam lifted the camera. The weight of it in his hands felt familiar, yet terrifying. It was a tool of truth, but for Liam it was also a trigger. As he tried to lift the viewfinder to his eye, the forest around him seemed to fade. He remembered the flash of explosions and the screams of the dying from his time overseas. His hands began to tremble violently. The camera rattled in his grip, the strap shaking against his wrist. He fought to steady himself to look through the glass, but the panic was a rising tide he could not hold back. Defeated, he lowered the camera to the grass and sat back on his heels, burying his face in his hands, while Rusty pressed a comforting nose against his shoulder. Night had fallen over the cabin, wrapping the woods in a suffocating darkness. Inside, the only light came from a single flickering bulb hanging above the kitchen table. Liam sat hunched over the negatives he had retrieved from the ammunition box, using a magnifying loupe to inspect the grainy black and white images. His breath hitched as the details came into focus. The photos depicted a convoy of heavy trucks parked on the riverbank under the cover of night. The logos on the doors were unmistakable predecessors to the modern EverGreen branding. Men in coveralls were rolling 50-gallon drums off the tailgates, watching them splash into the dark water. Liam lowered the loupe, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He looked at the map spread out on the table. The location in the photographs was the exact stretch of river flowing right in front of this cabin. He realized with chilling clarity why Marcus Stone was so desperate. When the dam upstream was removed next month, the water level would drop significantly. The river would recede, and the muddy grave of those toxic drums would be exposed for the entire world to see. The next morning brought a heavy, wet fog. Needing to verify the landscape against the photographs, Liam retrieved his old drone from the van. It was a piece of equipment from his former life, chipped and worn, but functional. He stood on the porch and sent the small machine buzzing up into the gray sky. He watched the video feed on his controller as the drone ascended the camera, panning over the tree line and out toward the rushing water. Suddenly, a thunderous explosion tore through the quiet morning air. On the screen, the horizon spun violently, and then the feed went dead. The sharp report of the shotgun blast echoed through the valley like a cannon. For Liam, the sound was not just a gunshot, it was a portal to hell. Instantly, the damp forest vanished. He was back in a dusty street overseas, surrounded by smoke and screaming. His knees buckled and he collapsed onto the wooden porch planks. His chest seized up as if an iron band had been tightened around his lungs. He gasped for air, but found none. His vision blurred, swimming with phantom flashes of light and memory. He was paralyzed, drowning in a panic so absolute it felt like dying. Then a heavy weight settled onto his chest. Rusty had moved in. Sensing the chemical shift in Liam's scent that signaled terror, the dog lay his full 80 pounds across Liam's torso. It was a grounding technique known as deep pressure therapy. The crushing weight forced Liam to focus on the physical sensation rather than the chaos in his mind. Rusty began to lick the tears that were streaming down Liam's face into his beard, his rough tongue a rhythmic, insistent tether to reality. "I am here," the action seemed to say. "We are here." Slowly, the sounds of the forest returned. The phantom smoke cleared. Liam looked up into Rusty's warm, amber eyes filled with profound concern. The dog whined softly, nudging Liam's chin. Realization pierced the fog of trauma. Whoever fired that shot was still out there. They were under attack. If Liam stayed down, he would leave Rusty defenseless. A fierce, protective instinct surged through him, stronger than the fear. With a trembling hand, he reached up and buried his fingers in Rusty's thick fur. He had to stand up, not for himself, but for the dog who had just saved him. The echo of the shotgun blast had barely faded when a new sound began to vibrate through the floorboards. It started as a low, mechanical growl and quickly escalated into a deafening roar. Liam looked out the window and saw the yellow arm of a massive excavator cresting the ridge above the cabin. It dug its iron bucket into the sodden earth, tearing away the bank of a diversion channel. Marcus Stone was not just trying to scare them away, he was using the relentless rain as a weapon. By diverting the floodwater and destabilizing the slope, he was engineering a landslide to bury the cabin and everything inside it. Liam scrambled to his feet, shoving the waterproof bag containing the negatives and the camera over his shoulder. He grabbed Rusty by the collar. The house gave a sickening groan as the first wave of mud slammed into the back wall. The kitchen window shattered with the sound of breaking glass, and brown sludge began to pour across the floor. They burst out the front door, lungs burning, as they sprinted toward the only escape route left, the rising creek that separated the property from the main highway. The ground beneath their feet was slick and treacherous. Behind them, the cabin uttered a final wooden scream as the roof collapsed under the weight of the sliding mountain. They reached the creek, which was now a churning torrent of white water. Liam hesitated only for a second before wading in. The freezing cold bit through his jeans like needles. He was halfway across when his boot slipped on a mossy stone. He fell hard, the icy water filling his mouth and nose. In the chaos, the strap of the dry bag slipped from his numb fingers. Liam surfaced, coughing violently, and watched in horror as the orange bag tumbled downstream, catching on a jagged branch protruding from the rushing water. It was trapped in the fiercest part of the current, just out of reach. Liam tried to lunge for it, but his injured leg buckled. He was helpless, watching the evidence of 40 years of crime threatening to wash away. Then came a splash. Rusty had launched himself into the river. The golden retriever battled the current with powerful strokes, his head bobbing above the foam. He reached the snag and paddled furiously to hold his position. Opening his jaws, he clamped down on the nylon strap of the bag. He did not bite down hard. Instinct took over. Using the soft mouth technique bred into his ancestors for retrieving waterfowl without damaging the feathers, Rusty held the heavy bag with a grip gentle enough to carry an egg. He turned and swam against the raging water, his eyes fixed on Liam. It was a grueling effort, but Rusty fought every inch of the way until he reached the shallows, where Liam could grab the harness and haul him onto the muddy bank. They limped into a small, dry cave, nestled in the limestone bluffs 100 yards away. They were safe, but they were freezing. Rusty was shivering violently as wet fur plastered to his sides. Liam did not think about his own comfort. He stripped off his heavy canvas coat and wrapped it tightly around the trembling dog, rubbing Rusty's flanks to generate heat. Liam sat in his wet shirt teeth, chattering, pulling the dog onto his lap. In that dark, cold cave, the drive to survive was replaced by something stronger. He would freeze before he let anything happen to the creature who had just risked everything for him. The grand ballroom of the Seattle Convention Center was bathed in the artificial glow of chandeliers. At the podium, Marcus Stone stood immaculate in a charcoal suit, smiling benevolently at the gathered press. He was midway through a speech about EverGreen's commitment to ecological restoration and the bright future of the dam removal project. His voice was smooth, polished, and utterly hollow. The heavy double doors at the back of the room swung open with a dull thud that drew heads turning. Liam Harper limped into the hall. He was a stark contrast to the elegance of the room. His clothes were stiff with dried river mud, his face scratched by branches, and his hair wild. Beside him, walking with a slight limp but a high head, was Rusty. The golden retriever did not shrink from the crowd. He walked with the quiet dignity of a soldier returning from the front lines. A murmur rippled through the audience. Stone faltered, his smile twitching as he recognized the man he had tried to bury. Liam marched to the front of the stage. He did not shout. He simply placed the waterproof bag on the table in front of the reporters. From it, he pulled the large prints he had developed in a rush that morning alongside a jar of sludge Rusty had dug from the roots of the oak tree. "EverGreen is not saving the river," Liam said, his voice raspy from smoke and cold. "They are trying to erase a crime scene." For a heartbeat there was silence. Then the room erupted. Dozens of photographers raised their cameras simultaneously. The air was suddenly filled with the blinding white bursts of flashbulbs firing in rapid succession. To anyone else, it was just the paparazzi. To Liam, it was a war zone. The rapid flashes seared his retinas. The clicking shutters sounded like the rattle of distant gunfire. The room spun. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating him. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The panic that had seized him in the woods returned with vengeance. He swayed on his feet, his vision tunneling. He was going to fall. He was going to shatter right there in front of the world. Then he felt it. A warm, solid weight pressed firmly against his shin. Rusty had moved to his side and sat down, leaning his heavy head hard against Liam's leg. It was a grounding anchor in the spinning chaos. Liam looked down. Rusty looked up his tail, giving a single slow thump against the carpet. The dog's amber eyes were calm, devoid of fear. "I am here," the pressure said. "We survived the mud. We can survive the light." Liam took a ragged breath. He focused on the warmth of the dog against his leg. The flashbacks receded. The noise faded into the background. He looked up straight into the lens of the nearest television camera. He did not flinch. "This is the truth about the Hoh River," he declared, his voice steady and strong. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for EverGreen. The evidence was undeniable. Marcus Stone was led away in handcuffs before the week was out, and federal investigators descended on the riverbank. 6 months later, the sun broke through the clouds over Forks. The cabin had been rebuilt, simple and sturdy, its windows open to the fresh mountain air. The river flowed clear and free, the dam finally gone. Liam sat on the porch steps. In his hands rested Uncle Arthur's Leica. He lifted it to his eye. His hands were steady now. He focused the lens on the figure sleeping in the patch of sunlight on the grass. Rusty twitched in his sleep, chasing dream rabbits. Liam pressed the shutter. It was a soft, mechanical click, the sound of a moment captured, not a weapon fired. It was the first picture of his new life. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply stand by the ones we love when the storms come. Rusty taught us that true loyalty is not just about survival, but about being the anchor for someone else in their darkest hour. If Liam and Rusty's journey warmed your heart today, please leave a like and share your thoughts with us in the comments below. We invite you to join our storytelling family by subscribing so we can share more moments like this together. For another tale of courage and connection, please click the video appearing on your screen right now.